One of the challenges that I face as a songwriter and recording person is simply making time to write and to record. And I've found over the years that it's pretty easy to find little slices of time in your day to write, because you can just work on words or hum a melody to yourself, much to the annoyance of the people in the neighboring cubicle. But finding time to record is much more difficult. It's in part because recording involves a lot of physical space. You know, the typical rig has a computer and an audio interface and whatever cables or microphones you decide to use and whatever instruments you decide to use. And then there's a matter of finding a place to record, which has either got to be totally dead or have pristine reflections, which almost no space actually has. So I'm extremely grateful for devices that help me incorporate recording into my everyday life. And this is my everyday life. I just finished commuting from my house to my office. I'm sitting in the neighboring parking garage. I just wrote the basic ingredients for a new song on that commute, and I'm going to record it in this space using a device that fits snugly inside that backpack. It's the Zoom R4. This device is fairly new to me, but I've had a lot of fun exploring it, and I think that its best use case is, well, probably not in a car, but otherwise kind of like the use case that I'm going to demonstrate in this video. Recording on the go or in unusual spaces using minimal gear. So after I go and fulfill my, normal work career obligations, I'm going to return to this device and to the handful of supplies sitting here in the passenger seat, and I'm going to record a song. In this space, with those tools, I hope to demonstrate how you could cram a little bit more recording into your life. Okay, I probably look roughly the same, but much has changed since you last saw me. For one thing, my body is fueled by the kind of poison that only comes out of a Keurig coffee machine. Second, I've written a set of lyrics to accompany the little melodies that I worked out on my harmonica this morning. Those are the basic ingredients that I need to begin recording using the R4. As you can probably guess from its size, the R4 is designed to be portable, and it is very portable. It's only like a little bit bigger feeling than an iPhone, mostly because of its thickness. And I actually have one of Tascam's DP6 devices, which is their portable pocket studio offering. And this is significantly smaller. It's probably about 2/3 of the size. It's got a little bit of weight to it, but very, very small. And one of the best things about it is that it's battery powered. And I guess the first thing I need to do in order to do my recordings here is actually replace those batteries. A project begins on the R4 by creating a new project. The easiest way to do that is to hold down the stop button, which creates that little sub-menu that appeared with blue blocks at the bottom of the screen. That's a really nice way to keep important functions hidden from the surface of the device, but easily accessible. Much more elegant, I think, than some of the solutions on Tascam's DP06. If I hold down stop, right there on the far left is a new purge button. That's going to create a new project. I'm going to click that now. And then it gives me a message to say that I have successfully done what I set out to do. And then the main menu of the R4 displays some basic information about the project session that you're working on. It's got the time of the session up there in the top left corner. It's got some stuff that's not doing anything related to each of the 4 mono tracks that are sort of the core of this system and that correspond with each of the 4 sliders that are there in the center. If you're recording to a track, then the screen will show you the level of the inbound signal that's being received by this device, and you control that with the slider that's associated with that channel or track, kind of like you would with a trim control on an older device. And then once you're playing back, you just use the same slider for the same track to set the output volume level of that track, and you'll get sort of a measurement or a readout of that on the screen. But this is an opportunity to describe one of the features of the R4, which is indicated down here in the bottom. It's got 32-bit technology. Every file that's recorded into this device is recorded at 32-bit and 48K as a WAV file. That's pretty cool. I mean, I honestly don't know that much about bit. See, I don't even know whether to call it bit depth or bit. I think it's bit depth and not bit rate. Somebody can tell me in the comments. But 32 is good. Like Redbook or CD quality is only 16. So, I mean, 32 is bigger than that, right? I suppose that means it's better quality. What the R4's manual and marketing materials tell you about the 32-bit float is that it prevents clipping. I honestly haven't really tested that. And then, you can see the other core functions of this on the face, right? Like you can have a stop, a play, and then a record button. See, I pressed play and it's starting to play. If you want to stop, you press stop. And then if you want to go back to the beginning of what you've recorded, you just press stop again, which I think is pretty convenient. The fast forward and rewind buttons are right here. And these are actually really great. Not only can you hold them to like move around as you would expect to, but if you click them one click at a time, they move by increments of a second, which I think is really, really nice. I can't tell you how often I'm trying to record something and really just need to scoot around by like 8 or 10 seconds at a time. It's nice just to be able to do that really precisely. And then of course, there's a record button on this device. You just hit record and it will begin to record. Since we're talking about recording, let's talk about what you actually record. Over here on the right-hand side, it's like right there. There's a button that says input. You press it to select what kind of input is going to be recorded on each track. I think this is an incredibly easy to use, intuitive, elegant solution for choosing inputs for particular tracks. All you do is say you want to record a track 4, because that's convenient for my thumb. You start pressing this little button that's above track 4, and it will select, in this case, it's selecting mic, because that's what's been picked down here, but we'll get to that later. If you keep pressing it, it'll pick input B, which is also down there. Input B with a little lightning bolt, which means it's powered with phantom power, and then go back to no arming at all. If I switch this switch, so at the bottom, down here, I said I'd get to it in a minute, and I will. If it's reading input A, then when you press this button, it selects input A, and then input A with the lightning bolt of phantom power before toggling through the other options. The options for actually receiving signal in this device are exactly what I wanted to see in a device like this, and are better than the options that are available in Tascam's DP6, at least better in some ways. I've never done an A-B to really compare the built-in mic on this to the built-in mics on the Tascam device. I use those built-in mics a lot, and I've used this built-in mic a lot. My sense of it is that there must be some kind of high-pass filtering going on with the signal that comes in there. It doesn't capture nearly as much low-end from, say, an earnestly strummed acoustic guitar as I would expect, and it's got a lot of treble information, kind of crispy up on top. Sometimes when I'm recording, I worry that it's going to have too much treble. That hasn't been a huge problem for me yet, and if it was, there are things we can do about that, which I'll get to in a minute. But you don't have to record with the built-in mic. That's just an option if you're looking for something that's built-in and super convenient. You've also got two inputs for external sources here on the bottom of the R4. Input B is always on and runs, the same way at all times. Input A is only selected if you have moved this toggle from mic over to input A. In each case, you've got one of these dual jacks that can receive either a 1/4 inch or an XLR. And this is so awesome. Probably my chief complaint about using Tascam's DP6 is that you can't just plug a regular old microphone into it via XLR. If what you're looking for is a degree of minimalism and to carry as few things as possible and still be able to do some real recording, having an XLR in is incredibly valuable. And that about covers the features that affect inbound signal. There's one more thing that I want to talk about and that I suspect I'm going to use in this front seat of my car session, and that is the effects that are available under this effect button. If you press the effect button, it opens a menu that says input A/mic effect. I think it should be obvious, but that means that you can apply up to 2 effects, as you can see there, the yellow one and the blue one, to what is coming in on input A or the mic signal, whatever you've selected via the selector down here. So the effects don't apply to anything that comes into input B. The yellow series of effects is like preamps and then simulations of guitar and bass amplifiers. And then blue is everything else, ranging from models of like classic overdrive or distortion effects to chorus and other modulation to delay. There aren't actually any reverbs in the blues section. That may come as a surprise to you, but I guess that's because reverb is covered somewhere else on this device. I'll get to that later, I promise. Overall, my impression of these effects is that they are probably what you'd expect if you've experimented with the effects on inexpensive emulation modeling devices. Some of them can sound really good, but not necessarily really accurate to what they are emulating. If you can get over the hurdle of thinking that doesn't sound like my real tube screamer or that doesn't sound like my real Fender Bassman, then you can find sounds that you will really like. Okay, that's a lot of talking. I need to do some recording. And I think I'm going to start by recording some harmonica, which was the basis for writing this song. And it's the only actual pitch producing instrument I have in the car other than my own voice. I need something to help me create the harmonic bedrock for this thing. So I guess this is what I'm going to work with. I mean, it just sounds like a harmonica. Can we do something more interesting with it? This is what I ended up with. Okay, and I guess we just try this. I had no idea how hard it was to play a little harmonica for an entire song, especially when all your slobber gets inside of it and it stops making sounds. We're going to have to deal with that problem later, but I don't really have time. This is not an infinite lunch break, so it's time to move on to a vocal. I've already got a mic plugged into input A. I'm just going to continue to use this mic. I need to now change not where this is plugged in, but go to the input button, click it, cycle through until it's clean on track 1, and then select input A on track 2. That is so much easier than selecting and assigning inputs on the DP6. I'm going to get into a more meaty comparison of this device to the DP6 at another time when I'm honestly much more familiar with this, because I have got a lot of hours with the Tascam. But so far this is performing well, but not necessarily in the way that I expect and prefer, but like I said, that's a topic for another video. I am deeper than I've ever been. Now I need to add a track of real rhythm to replace the little click track that was running that whole time. For this, I want a slightly more ambient sound, so I'm going to disconnect the microphone from this and click over to the built-in mic, and then select the built-in mic for track 3. And sometimes it takes a few times for me to remember how to use a fucking shaker. Track 3, recorded. And I have to pause there because lunch break is over. But I'll be back in 3, 2, 1, 0. Now, as you can see, a lot has changed since I last saw you. I'm no longer in a parking garage. I'm no longer a system full of Keurig. All that has since been sweated out. A lot of time has passed, but my same project remains before me, and I'm still here in this car trying to finish it. Having recorded harmonica, vocals, and shaker, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do next, but in the time since I last saw you, I did do one more thing, and that is attempted to do sort of like a boom, bass vocal part to simulate a bass sound, and it provided a perfect opportunity to experiment with the amount of versatility that this effects menu can provide you. There is a preamp in here called a super low preamp, and I tried it on bass the other day, and it's like it only produces really low frequencies. It sucks out basically everything else. So when I ran my boom 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 into that preamp, it made something very, very low, and that I quite liked. At times it doesn't even sound like its voice. That filled the fourth and final mono track on the R4 and left me with an obvious next step, and that is to perform a bounce. Now, I have to perform a bounce even if I don't intend to do further recording, and honestly, at this moment, I don't know whether I will. I say that because Zoom R4 manual terminology uses bounce in a way that I wasn't expecting based on my experience using multi-trackers. I'm used to the term bounce referring to a specific internal mixdown process that's designed to free up tracks in a multi-tracker Porta-Studio. It's what you would hear people talk about in old like Beatles recording sessions when they had a limited number of tracks on tape. That is what the bounce does on this device, and I'll get into the details more later, but bounce is also the term that this device uses to describe just like a final mixdown. If you wanted to take the individual separate track elements that you've recorded, turn them into one stereo, wave, or MP3 file, and then export it. To do that, you also perform the bounce. And there's no like other term for it. The manual and the device don't call it a mix down. You just do a bounce, and then what you have bounced can be exported. I honestly found that very, very confusing, but it does mean that my next step is obvious. I have to go to the bounce menu. It gives you two options, a quick bounce and a real-time bounce. A real-time bounce is what I am used to doing as a bounce. Like, you start the bouncing process and you essentially mix the elements that you've recorded live in real time, and the result is some sort of mono or stereo file that then you use as the basis for further recording. That's pretty normal, but so what's this quick bounce? Well, the quick bounce is a quick bounce. You just set the sliders in a specific position. I know you can't even see the sliders This is not a professional way to shoot a YouTube video. You set the sliders in a specific position and it just runs the bounce without you moving those sliders at all. And it is a lot quicker. In my experience, it takes between 30 seconds and a minute to perform one of the quick bounces. And you don't have to do anything, so it's kind of like a hands-off, minds-off moment. And it's also especially useful for this device because the last time I tried to do a real-time bounce with this thing, I was not very happy with the results. This brings me to my main and biggest quibble with the R4, and that is with the little, there they are, the little blue sliders that you could barely see before. They're too small. Not the physical sliders that you push around themselves. I really mean the track that they are on. It's too small and it's too sensitive. And the effect of that is that very, very small movements of those sliders result in really noticeable changes in the volume of the track that you are playing back. That means that it is much more difficult to nail a very specific volume that you want to hear when you're doing a real-time bounce. It's hard to do. It's hard to get exactly right. Now, the Zoom helps you with this insofar as every time you perform a bounce, it saves the stereo wave file that that bounce creates. It saves it forever, right? So you could, in theory, do like 50 real-time bounces and then go back and listen to all of them and decide which one you liked best, or maybe even take all of them into a DAW and comp the one that sounds best. But that's just not the way that I like to work. I much prefer to know where I'm going to set my levels, know what I want things to sound like, execute, feel good about that, and move on. It's what I'm used to. And that makes this really not the ideal solution for me personally and the workflow that I prefer. However, if you want a portable recording device that you can use to create tracks that then you later edit and mix in a DAW, this could be perfect for you. Not only does it save everything that you record initially in 32-bit WAV files, but even when you perform a bounce, whether it's a QuickTime bounce or a real-time bounce, it saves all of the individual tracks that you had recorded, whatever those were, they got pumped into the bounce. It clears them in the UI of this device, but it saves them on your SD card. It saves them in the same folder as it saves all the bounces that you perform. So you could, in theory, just use the bouncing mechanism to create like a go-by track, a reference track for further recording, but not anything resembling a final mix. And then take all of the things that you record, however many layers there are that you do with bounce upon bounce in this device, import them into a DAW, and then edit and mix as you see fit. Oh no, maybe I should turn my car on. That is not my preferred way of working, but many people might prefer it. And for what I'm doing right now, which is essentially creating a sketch demo for a song that I just wrote, it honestly works fine. In case this is the final step of this project, I am going to perform a real-time bounce and report back. Oh shit, before I do that, I gotta show you one more really important feature in this device. And that is the post-production track editing menu that becomes accessible when you click any of the, again, this is really not professional, any of the dots that you can see right here at the top. If you click one like track 4 for my little boom, 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 boom track, you get a variety of options. You get 3-band EQ, you get panning, which I do care about a lot, and I'm sorry not to see in a physical slider or knob on this device. You even get some echo and reverb. Now, I don't know why you get echo, because you have a separate set of delay effects that you can add to what comes into track channel 1 when you're recording, but and honestly, you don't get a whole lot of control over that echo, so that seems like it's not helpful. But the reverb is helpful. There's not a ton that you can do to control it, but you can add certain amounts of reverb, really send certain amounts of each of these tracks to like a mix reverb in each of these menus. I think that's kind of nice. It's not the best sounding reverb I've ever heard, but it's going to add some nice space to the sound of recording in the front seat of a car. I'm also going to see if I can diddle with the EQ, especially on this boom, boom, boom track, to make it sound even more unnatural. And then I'll perform my bounce. Done. And it was exactly as frustrating as I remember it being. I have a shaker track in there, as I think you probably already saw in this video. And I think at one point in the last chorus, I accidentally like boosted it way out of proportion for where it needed to be with the slightest touch. That is unbelievably frustrating. honestly. I work a lot with cheap plastic tiny devices that do not give me that problem. In fact, it's so frustrating that I almost have to believe that it is not the intended use of this device. I mean, obviously it gives you the ability to perform real-time bounces, but the real-time bounce, the classic bounce, is an integral part of any kind of standalone multi-track recorder process. And this just doesn't make it all that easy. It's not just the sliders, by the way. I mean, obviously the EQ is behind a menu and can't be accessed really easily when you're doing real-time bounce. And that's common though on smaller multi-trackers. But even the panning is stuck behind a menu. Those factors make me think that this device really isn't designed to be used as a standalone multi-tracker. It's not designed for the kind of guy like me, an outlier, who wants to do all of their recording without touching a computer. But that's okay. This is still probably the best handheld, like truly handheld recording device I've ever used. So now I've got, you see, there used to be 4 columns, are those columns? 4 columns on the screen before. Now that I've performed my bounce, there's a 5th column. It's green, it's labeled bounce. Green means there's something living there. Gray means there's nothing living there. As I mentioned before, the way this functions is that after you perform a bounce / mix down, it clears the tracks so that you don't have to decide what to do with them anymore. You can just continue recording. That kind of black and white decision making by this device is another element that makes me think this isn't designed for you to be strategic about your bounces, to bounce 2 out of your 4 tracks and then continue to do more precision mixing with the remaining 2 while you fill those 2. No. All that kind of shit that you would do with a normal multi-tracker setup, out the picture with this. It wants you to just keep recording and leave the mixing, the real mixing, for later. Now, it happens to turn out that in this case, my bounce is going to be my final mix down. The last thing I'm going to show you before signing off is how to export that. So what you do is you once again hold the stop button to get these little menu items to show up. How am I going to do this? Oh my gosh, craning a finger over there in the bottom right corner is setting. You'll notice that you've got a tuner button there. And if I had a guitar with me, that would be really useful. God knows I can't tune my voice. I'm going to hit setting, and now you're in the settings menu. I'm going to the project menu, going down to export, and now I've got some really helpful options. Again, options that make me think that this isn't really meant to be the place where you're going to do your full final release ready mix. Because the very first thing it tells you is, do you want a WAV or an MP3? It gives you the option to export your bounce mix down as a compressed file. That's really useful for like sharing rough demos. It's not what most people do when they decide that they're going to share something on their Bandcamp as a final release. Anyway, I actually am going to export this as an MP3 because I want to upload that MP3 to the February album writing month website for today. This will be my 17th song. Selecting it, and I have the option then to normalize it or not. And I'm going to normalize it. Let's see, estimated time, 3 minutes. I'm cool with that. Clicking execute. It's got a nice little bar that we don't have to look at. I assume that it's going to complete itself. It's got enough battery. I hope that was an interesting and maybe even useful demonstration of what the R4 can do. I'm sort of happy with the result. It made me feel like I was getting the ideas when they were as fresh as possible. Like as soon as I sat down in a place where I had a certain amount of privacy, I could hit record. I think that's exactly the kind of experience that this is trying to facilitate. It wants to give you what the Voice Memos app gives you on your phone, but with a lot more control and with the ability to add layers easily so you can keep the ideas rolling. I'm going to use it probably as the center of the rest of the demo recording that I do for the remainder of February album writing month. By the way, if you haven't checked that out, FAWM, FAWM.org, you should go check it out. It is an incredibly vital community of writers doing really amazing work, and more importantly, encouraging each other to do furious, interesting, amazing work. It's easily the most exciting and engaging and encouraging and inspiring community of writers that I've ever encountered online. If you're a songwriter and you're interested in getting a little burst of creativity for the last, I don't know, like 9 days of this month, go check it out. February is not yet over. I'm going to continue to experiment with this for the remainder of the month. I'm going to edit this video and post it. Feels like I'm rambling. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you around. And don't worry, this video wouldn't be complete without showing you the demo that I recorded in the front seat of my car, so here it is. Hope you enjoy. Toes and ankles shiver in the swell, and I count minnows and hermits in their shells, but I won't rest in the shallows, waiting for waves to shake me awake, waiting for waves to sweep me away from this shore. And what I'm sure of, waiting for waves. Spray splatters against my chest, and I find laughter while catching my breath. Soon I learn to dance with the water, waiting for waves to shake me awake, waiting for waves to sweep me away from the shore. And what I'm sure of, waiting for waves. Deeper than I've ever been, and shadows lurking under where I swim. I wonder what old world I'm sinking in, waiting for waves to shake me awake, waiting for waves to sweep me away from the shore. And what I'm sure of, waiting for waves to shake me awake, waiting for waves to sweep me away from this shore. And what I'm sure of, waiting for waves.